It's not every day that Nintendo launches a new app, but in the March Direct we had the big final reveal of Nintendo Today. Perhaps it wasn't quite as thrilling as a one more thing of a new Zelda or Animal Crossing or any number of other past game announcements that have capped off Direct shows, but I do think it could prove to be a very consequential change for the company. In this video, I'm going to talk through why this app might have been initiated, why it could be of particular benefit to Nintendo now, the strategic considerations at play, and then at the end I'll give you my initial impressions of the app and speculate on what features it could evolve going forward. Ever since Nintendo launched their account system nearly a decade ago now, it has been a major aspiration to build greater closeness with their community. With smartphones and smartwatches, it's possible to be advertising to people effectively 24/7, and that's obviously a good place for a company to be. They want to be as high profile in people's lives as they can. Nintendo has a special, nostalgic place in the hearts of many adults, and this helps them to reach out cross-generationally. However, a bespoke app has several big advantages for them. For one, the current social media landscape is tricky to navigate and becoming trickier. There are all sorts of challenges that maintaining a consistent social media presence poses for an international company like Nintendo. Then there's the risk of audience segmenting between apps. Facebook is used far less by under 25s, with TikTok coming through as the premier app for this age group, but TikTok risks being banned in the US. Twitter and X have seen many challenges over the years proposing different experiences or political perspectives, and there are countries which are going as far as to ban social media for under 16s, with a prevailing wind around the world in favour of greater censorship of these devices. We have seen most apps are designed with the principles of slot machine design to be as compulsive as possible to the users, endless scrolling to ensure people don't have a pattern interrupt that forces their eyes elsewhere, notifications with bright colours and satisfying pings precisely designed to evoke curiosity, and of course the dot 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 on chat apps to keep people hanging on the next digital word. The market incentives to addict people are huge, and as smart technology becomes ever more integrated with our lives, with AI, wearables, and more, the incentives to regulate only increase, and you only need to look at the progressive regulation of cigarettes over recent decades to see one path that could be taken. Australia is implementing that ban on social media for under 16s, and it's possible to see further blocking of apps by government, if only as a leverage tool in international disputes. Essentially, no single platform is going to be fully reliable for the long term. It's not just that it's hard for Nintendo to know where to position itself in an ever-changing landscape, but social media requires long-term connections and the build-up of trust. Having to pivot constantly is tiring, but also requires a lot more people with skills in their organization to understand and adapt to these different landscapes. Better then to have one app which can bypass this as their primary communication method and speak directly to people. It is, as I speculated before, a much needed evolution of the direct-to-you concept Iwata conceived all those years ago. This isn't to say that they will replace completely existing social media apps. They have used Facebook and Twitter or X for a considerable time, and they're not going to surrender this large install base. It's possible to imagine in the future that they may see a benefit in utilizing another app, especially if one becomes standard, but standards do change over time. It's possible to imagine that just as Facebook and TikTok largely appeal to different generations, that in 10 years' time there will be a completely different app dominating the attention of younger people. Creating Nintendo's own source of information bypasses this. Parents can be happy that the content will be trustworthy, as Nintendo have established a rock-solid reputation in this field. Having widgets prompting about Nintendo helps to integrate Nintendo products into people's lives further. There's also the familiarity effect. Just by becoming more familiar with something or someone, people tend to show greater liking. This is very helpful for Nintendo as it tries to build a wider IP portfolio. Most people on the street could identify Mario, Most under a certain age could recognize Pokemon. Zelda and Link are dicier, but people might at least relate them to Nintendo. But once you get to Pikmin, Splatoon, and Donkey Kong, there's a chance that the familiarity would wane amongst a large portion of the general public. Just by showing these characters again and again, it is likely to build familiarity and therefore liking, and therefore when games, audiovisual content, and merchandise with these characters drop, they are more likely to be successful. And the app is particularly effective as a medium of building familiarity because it is leveraging franchises people already like. This is also important at this point because while Nintendo can guarantee a lot of attention and interest in Switch 2 right now, and Switch 2 is likely to drive a lot of people to the app, I think it is clear that Switch 2 is really just one component of their long-term plan for the next several years. With films, apps, theme park attractions, as well as entries into the toy market such as Alarmo, Nintendo is diversifying fast. They know that any single console system, however successful, cannot be relied on indefinitely, and building resilience through diversification is the name of the game. Now, at the time of writing, it seems that the app isn't available even on the Play Store, although it is available for direct download via the Nintendo site. As a result, I have had a chance to play around with it, and early impressions are it's fine. I don't anticipate at this point in time it will become a major forum for Nintendo to use, but over the long term, it very well could do. I also kind of hope they make a version of it available on the Switch 2 console itself. So firstly, when you boot it up, it asks you to select the game series you're interested in having as the main aesthetic, and this is interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, it as good as gives Nintendo's own order of importance as to how they see their major series. Super Mario and The Legend of Zelda are the undisputed top two, then Animal Crossing and Splatoon, which makes sense in terms of sales, then Pikmin, which they're clearly pushing into the big time. After this, we have Kirby and Fire Emblem, big but co-owned, then Metroid and Xenoblade, small but fully owned, and then Donkey Kong and Classics. Oh no, wait a minute, before Donkey Kong we have WarioWare, not Wario, WarioWare. I might go into this in a separate video because I think it is significant in several ways, but for our purposes in this video, I think it makes sense that WarioWare has a distinctive, fun aesthetic that people might opt to use. Curious by its absence, of course, is Pokemon. Sure, Nintendo doesn't fully own Pokemon, but it doesn't fully own Kirby or Fire Emblem either. I wonder why Pokemon isn't here. It could be that the Pokemon Company wished to retain operational independence. It doesn't benefit them particularly to come too much under the umbrella of Nintendo, since with their Pokemon stores and such like, they already have a very strong independent marketing arm. Equally, Nintendo might not feel either the need or the benefit in promoting Pokemon content, with it already being successful and Nintendo's cut of it being only partial. Better in this case to bolster the profile of their wholly owned, but less well recognised franchises such as Splatoon, Pikmin and Metroid. What could be kind of sad is that no niche franchises are given the nod, including ones that have recent or scheduled releases like Tomodachi and of course Advance Wars. However, I could definitely see Nintendo adding to this list in future if and when they get a franchise that's worth developing, but for now, I think we know where they're at with their main series. The app also allows you to toggle what information you see. Seemingly, Nintendo Directs are confirmed for the long term, as the app lists events as Nintendo Directs, Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo Switch distribution dates including demos, recommended events, in-game events, other events, and even hidden events, which we don't have any further information on. Surprisingly absent is Nintendo Music updates, although presumably this comes under Nintendo Switch Online. There is also a widget which doesn't seem to currently work. So, where might this app go? We've seen this kind of thing play out before. Nintendo Switch Online was trailed with the Nintendo Switch, but only really came into being at the end of 2018, where it launched with NES games, and the following year we had the launch of Tetris 99. Gradually, though, it expanded outwards with new game systems, and then the expansion pack adding not just extra consoles, but also exclusive DLC. Now the membership gives you access to Nintendo Music, even more exclusive games like F-Zero 99, vouchers, and more. It is now a very fully featured service, but this has evolved over the better part of a decade, and I think we should expect Nintendo today to progress similarly. Currently, it is clear that they want to stick with the direct format for major news announcements, and these are obviously hugely beneficial, particularly to third parties who must pay, I'm guessing, outsized sums to ensure they get a slot in such a high profile show. But in an age of withering attention spans, having quick 1 minute trailers dropping straight onto an app would make sense. Nintendo kind of tried this in 2020, where big games like Paper Mario and Pikmin 3 Deluxe went to Twitter, while directs were hived off as partner showcases to cudgel together all the third party stuff. I think it would upset many of their partners if they completely ended the tradition of the big General Direct, but I could see them continuing down this route of having less frequent but bigger major showcases, punctuated by shorter trailers showcased through the Nintendo Today app. We've also seen this approach trailed at the end of last year. Remember these several days on the bounce where we had the announcement of the playtest, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, and Alarmo all in the space of a week. They've done this a few times, in fact. I think in retrospect, this was a very conscious way to try on for size, having news trailed not in one big dump, nor in occasional one-off reveals, but in a kind of rhythm over the course of a week. Directs have that compulsive element of waiting for one more thing, but think how much better the engagement would be if people were frantically loading up the app each morning to see if something exciting is dropping during periods where Nintendo is making a lot of announcements. Now, clearly, Nintendo can't possibly meet these sort of expectations on a regular basis, not enough to have 365 big reveals a year, but perhaps they're not all that far off. They release maybe 12 or 16 games a year and maybe a handful of additional announcements of note that have to do with theme parks, films, the museum, or more significant Nintendo Switch Online updates. If each game gets 3 trailers, well, hey, I could see them managing to average an announcement a week by replacing directs outright. But more likely is they take what might previously have been one of their 3 general directs for the year and split one of those shows with perhaps 4 big announcements into a sequence of announcements over the space of a few weeks or even a few days. This definitely feels plausible, as it's kind of what they already did with the social media drops during October of 2024. But does the app have any broader potential? It definitely feels like a companion piece to Alarmo. Alarmo is the clock, Nintendo Today is the calendar. They can update the Alarmo firmware, so in theory, calendar integration would also be possible. Is it likely? I guess it would be needlessly fiddly, and after all, the point is to get onto people's phones, so I doubt they will, but I'd give perhaps a 30% chance that Nintendo Today does come to Alarmo by the end of 2027. It's also possible that if Alarmo either doesn't sell as hoped, or if they feel they've got all the benefit from it in the marketplace that they're ever going to get, they could opt to integrate Alarmo features into Nintendo Today, meaning that people literally wake up to the Nintendo Today app. I don't think this is an innovation that's likely for the near term, but I think it's distinctly possible as one option depending on how they come to view Alarmo. Nintendo loves cannibalizing its technology and development work into other purposes. See, for one of many examples, Labo turning into Game Builder Garage, or any number of games resurrected in remastered form on new systems. One key utilization I don't think you even need to be all that imaginative to spot is that they could use Nintendo Today to sell Switch 2 consoles, especially as part of their strategy to avoid scalping. Not only will Nintendo be able to distribute their own stock, but in theory they could partner with regional outlets and offer promotion through the Nintendo Today app for that particular outlet's supply of Switch 2. On balance, I think this is unlikely, as it could get rather complex. People tend to prefer to order from a smaller number of known retailers, and Nintendo's focus is generally to promote its own stores and its own provision, but it is an option that they could have for monetization. There's also the chance of having game-like elements built in. I'll come back to this in another video, but suffice to say that WarioWare-style microgames on the Nintendo Today app would be both, in theory, quite easy to implement and a great way to raise the profile of the WarioWare series. However, there are other options besides brand new games. One thing that people have been clamoring for years is the chance to play classic Nintendo games on smartphones. Nintendo has always preferred, and understandably so, to keep their content on their proprietary systems. However, if this app is their little corner of the smartphone world, it seems to me that long term, this could be a good platform to allow you to play a few classic games. I don't think it will happen soon, and Nintendo will want to avoid the app becoming too memory hungry, so I think NES and Game Boy titles would be the order of the day, and even then I think this would be a very long-term thing. I reckon games being added to this app before the end of 2025 will be a 10% chance, but I'm going to say 30% by the end of 2027. In this case, Nintendo Today would effectively become a baseline tier underneath Nintendo Switch Online. If the expansion pack content moved to base NSO and the expansion pack expanded, then they could manage to develop all the elements of the service at once and make a strong all-through experience. This does make me think that ultimately they will try to connect up the Nintendo accounts and the Nintendo Switch online services. What's curious about NSO is that it's explicitly tied to Nintendo Switch, and yet we know that Nintendo Music doesn't really use a Switch at all, though I really hope that on Switch 2 the app can be run in the background. It seems bizarre to me that you can do this with Smash, but not with Nintendo's own app. I think at this point, Nintendo will want to rebrand it from Nintendo Switch Online to just Nintendo Online. Why axe the Switch in NSO? Well, the Switch is their premier game platform brand, but people now already know Switch. The pivot they're trying to pull off now is to get people invested in the parent brand, Nintendo. There is also an element of risk with sticking with the Switch name, which is that if Switch 2 fails, or even if they just want to explore a different concept at some point in the future, then they will need to rebrand as they are making a lot of other changes. Now, I'm not saying a rebrand is imminent. Let's say 30% it will change its name by the end of 2027 even. But I think eventually the trajectory would have to be that they have a three-tier offer, just like the Switch Lite, Switch and Switch OLED represented a three-tier offer in terms of console provision. Nintendo Today is the central content hub for anybody with a Nintendo account. Then the baseline Nintendo Online membership becomes the subscription service that develops that. And then the expansion pack becomes for the core user base. By allowing people to progress straight from Nintendo Today to a Nintendo Online service, they could add Nintendo Music and perhaps other non-Switch related content into Nintendo Today going forward, integrating it further with their online provision. At least that makes sense to me as a structure that they can build around. To reiterate, I do think this is going to go slowly. They've been at the account systems for years, but now that they have Japanese mobile giant DNA teaming up with them on the Nintendo Systems Company to create a cohesive, bespoke network for their services, I would expect to see things starting to join up a lot more as time goes by, and it will be intriguing to see how this all plays out. Thank you as ever for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, and I shall be back soon for another Nintendo Forecast.